Today, we are going to see the 5 weak points of a narcissist, of a person, an anarchist. Why? Well, because knowing how to know them and keeping them in mind can help us defend ourselves. We've come to this point. Yes, Gemma, we want a video so we can defend ourselves from these types of people when zero contact is not an option. Well, here you have this video, I hope. Do you have this video? I hope you like it, that it is useful to you. Stay until the end because I always leave the best for last, along with my personal conclusion. Well, knowing the weak points of a narcissistic person with this type of disorder problem can help us defend ourselves and know the psychological profile a little better. How do you think? How do these types of people feel? Because it's always going to improve us somehow. Well, if not coexistence, understanding what we can do, where we can reach, and what we have to express, communicate, or do at a given specific moment. Okay, information is power, and here we have it. Let's look at those weak spots. Where can we go? Well, flank the situation a little. Many times it is not easy to distance ourselves. Zero contact is not an option. Well, hey, because they are in our family, because they are very established, because it is an environment that you cannot do without, etc. And yes, we also have to manage them in the work environment, etc., etc. So there are situations in which it is impossible to avoid since it is not an option, right? Zero contact, moving away would be the most convenient and ideal thing. And many times we say, hey, well, I pretend to ignore him, as if he wasn't there. But sometimes this is also super complicated because they make themselves notice, right? Demanding power, presenting influence, demanding attention. However, in this type of people, there are details that are their Achilles heel, their weaknesses, and we are going to see them right away. First of all, let's differentiate here. The nuance is important. I already do it in another video. I leave it up there, but here I clarify it again because it is an important paragraph. We must differentiate between the two most general types of narcissists that exist. There are two ways to classify them in general, and they are the great ones and the vulnerable ones. This is taken into account. It is very important when facing them in one way or another. A person with narcissistic personality disorder is not the same. Who is a great type? Okay, it's his. Their desire for greatness surpasses everything that a narcissistic person, since they are vulnerable, let's say they are always, since they demand attention and external validation. The first ones, the great ones, are more aggressive. Therefore, greater caution must be exercised. Here it is true that when you tell me in the comments, it rocks me. Whatever it is narcissistic, well, you have to pay attention to this type of profile that I make. Well, hey, first attending to this type of profile is great. Well, it is more dangerous in the sense that it can be more aggressive and you have to go slower with more patience, with more caution, more little by little. If he's the vulnerable type, hey, he's different. They tend to resort to victimization and have much lower self-esteem, much more fragile. So let's see those tricks, those defenses, those tools that we can use to dismantle the discourse, well, of manipulation of this type of people. The first good one, the first strategy, the first tool, it would be to present the I don't believe you invalidation. It's okay when his speech is dismantled because it's not necessary to say it like that, okay? It's, let's say, definitive. It's okay that he or she sees it, that we don't believe his speech, that in his assembled story, that all his assembly falls. It's okay when you see that there is no way to validate what the power of invalidation is saying. Say it whatever you want. I don't believe you. Well, no, it doesn't seem credible to me. Give me proof. Explain to me more. This is suspicious, or whatever you want to call it, worth something very subtle. It would be much better not to face it so directly, especially if it is of a great kind, to avoid an excessive reaction on your part. Okay, but something very subtle. Hey, Well, maybe what you're saying today isn't entirely true. Hey, are you sure? Even pretending to doubt, I'm sure what you say is true. There would be a small dismantling of his speech, and it gives rise to the narcissist at that moment. It is questioned, that is, we put it in check there as a moment of doubt. There would be a question on his part because he doesn't expect it. This reaction is not expected because one of their greatest needs is always to dazzle. And well, validate externally with. Let other people accept and swallow all your speech, all your fantasy, all your story. Therefore, showing that indifference, showing that bewilderment, that incredulity is going to hurt him. It is going to generate a doubt in that person. Let's say that we more or less return them in some way, although it is very forced to reality. It is worth putting our feet on the ground, although they are always going to deny it and they are always going to go misrepresenting his story, but they're never going to confront you and say, you're right, this never happened. They are going to accept the power of the lie, okay? They are never going to really put themselves where it plays. They are never going to accept it because it was a fantasy. However, it is true that there can be a certain validation, a certain value, well, a certain power in invalidation, but I repeat, you have to be very cautious. You have to be very cautious above all with the type of great narcissist because it could give rise to a reaction, well, quite aggressive. So you have to be careful, and you, more than anyone, better than anyone, you will know at what point, yes or no, you can use this tool, this resource for your benefit. Next important resource, and for them, a defect. An Achilles heel is your ability for self-reflection and self-analysis they're not capable of. Well, look inside and see if what they have done is right. It is wrong to reflect on what they have done, what has happened, whether it seems good to you, if it does not seem good to you, the way they act. Isn't there any kind of self-criticism on your part? If there is for others, of course, but not on their part, then let you confront them and tell them, hey, are you sure of what you've done, or does your behavior just make no sense? You act nonsense. You act strange again. It makes them doubt. It makes them rethink. At least for a moment, we confront them again with that weakness that they have. There are many defense mechanisms. It is the narcissistic person to avoid reaching this type of self-analysis. So it's worth confronting them again. Be careful with the narcissistic type, the great type. Because they can answer, hey, well, in the end, you're hitting the soft spot, right? So again, we have to arm ourselves with courage and patience, not do it when we think that all this is not convenient, very, very carefully, very stealthily, looking for the appropriate words. Sometimes the moment comes, it just comes, and you see it's the moment, and you say it, and other times it doesn't happen, and you don't have to look for it because it doesn't happen. But it is true that when it happens, having the necessary resources and following this video, watch it as many times as you need. Take notes as you need. You'll be clear, very clear, when and how to act. Questioning that way of acting at a given moment will confront you again with your fears, with your weaknesses. With what he builds walls and walls of defense mechanisms so as not to see each other's faces. Well, with that insecurity in the end, at the end of the day, which is questioning what he is doing. First we question what he says, and now we question what he's doing. The truth is that what you do is normal. Do you think what you're doing is logical, or your behavior just doesn't make sense? It doesn't make sense. I don't understand why you act like this. You can say it in so many ways. Very, very soft and yet very incisive. Therefore, from here, inviting them to tell us the reason why they are doing that is going to be another tool to invalidate, well, their attempt at manipulation towards us, okay? Let's just say we cut it dry when we start. When the speech begins manipulative towards our person trying to achieve something, we cut short, and at the same time somehow we are establishing very healthy limits of respect for ourselves. Third tool, an important resource that attacks the weakness of the narcissistic person. Is it when we say no the power to say no? My answer is no. You don't have my support. Hey, I can't support you in this. Say it however you want. But be very firm. Why? Well, because again, they won't be able to get through there. When we talk about limits in the previous point, we reach this one and look, we reaffirm ourselves. We must say that we must not set limits. There comes a moment when you hear, we must say no. If you don't say no now, then the limit is going to be exceeded in the extreme, okay? It must be said that not long before reaching our limit so that it does not exceed our limit. So keep it in mind, because otherwise when you realize it, you will have exceeded your limit and you will lament among the narcissist's weak points. His head explodes when someone tells him no. They can't take no for an answer. It is something that confronts them again with their fears, their insecurities, and their weaknesses. And if they need something, it is always to be the center of attention, to be validated, to be needed, to be admired. So not is something, so confrontational is something. Well, that's the power of no, right? Furthermore, always using no will not only set limits, it will also take them off their pedestal. Is it necessary for your mental health and his, even if you don't believe it because it makes him suffer, but it is always necessary to lower him whenever possible, right? Get them off their pedestal. There is always an assembled fantasy that, hey, what aces that in the end are so high that it's impossible to even see them, right? Well, hey, with a no. This is simply like with children, right? Does parenting have similarities with parenting? In the end, they don't stop being a bit childish. In his speech, it is a very crude simile, okay? But so that you understand me, well, they're as manipulating, as meandering, cajoling, and when the no comes, everything comes apart already, right? Well, with children, it's a little the same. They're testing here, they're testing there as far as the limits go. You have to set some limits. Yes, it is true that there is a point where you have to say no. If not, then it is much worse, because this is the same power of no here in addition to marking very healthy, very necessary limits to bring them down from their pedestal of greatness. Then there is the resource. Here we have reached the end. Remember, subscribe, tell me, share your case with this community. We all respond to each other and help each other. Do you share this valuable content with those people you think may be of interest to them? There are a lot of people who need information of this kind. Send it to them. And I've saved the best for last. Well, the best, the resource, the hardest Achilles heel is worth, because it's the hardest for them. So let's analyze this weakness and this weakness of the narcissistic person. It's nothing more or less than self-esteem. Self-esteem, self-esteem. Someone told me. In a comment that has her very high and is not only a reflection of her behavior, but nothing further from reality. They have a very fragile auto-extreme, hence the defense mechanism is always compensation. How do they compensate? Well, hey, always flattering yourself, seeking external validation at all costs, right? Even if it is manipulative, even if it is with lies, even if it is with deception, with whatever, but they always look for the validation is there. Obviously, the more external validation they need, the less self-esteem they will have. Self-esteem is fragile, very fragile. So confronting them with that self-esteem, in addition to taking them off the pedestal again, is going to make them again question that fear, the most absolute fear that they have here. Again, a lot of caution, a lot of patience, and knowing how to stick to what. Let's see. These are, let's say, resources to place them in their place at a specific moment. And given it is valid, especially at work, since you can mark limits in this way with a no, with a that you are sure, with a certainty that what you say is true. Or even here, since we would have to allude to his way of being. Since they have exercised multiple defenses to build an armor of knights errant or ladies errant, it is worth it that they are perfect and that they are super admired by everyone, etc., since they must be confronted with their true reality. Do you really think you're what you should be? Aren't you afraid that people will find out who you really are and you'll be alone or you'll be alone? Something as simple as telling them that we feel compassion for them for how they are and how they push people away from them, well, it's going to put them back in check because we're going to confront them again with their deepest fears. It's just that they know they are like that, if they know it in the end. What happens is that all they do is try to avoid it at all costs, and the more they avoid it, the closer they get. This is like fire, isn't it? The more you avoid it, the closer you are. Well, it's the same. In other words, in the end, these defense mechanisms are not effective at all. On the contrary, the more they exercise them, the closer they are to the fear they have. The more afraid they are of being alone and the more they do to avoid it, the closer they get to loneliness. Because there comes a time when people get tired, they leave. And here comes the last point, confronting them with the most absolute fear, loneliness, right? If we were talking about self-esteem, here's the point I give you as a gift, loneliness. The narcissistic person has an absolute deep fear of feeling and being alone because there is nothing left to scratch. What leagues do they play in, right? Experts in interpersonal, social relationships, etc. No, because you take all the power away from a narcissist. Experts in manipulation and looking good if you let them. Without people, there is no one to manipulate, there is no one to deceive, there is no one to deceive, right? Being left alone. Then if you confront them again, or any person, or at a given moment, you indirectly allude very sibyllically that she is going to be left alone. Because again, you put him or her in his place and confront the reality of the person. The narcissist needs people to feel. Someone alone has no power. That's what we say, not the person. A person like that alone, no, he has nothing. No, there are no games for him as he really needs external variation to feel someone. As soon as there is nothing, and you take away all the power then. Playing with that fear, presenting it to you, making it air is a way of setting a limit again. Okay, the thing is, this whole thing has a double edge. We can't always play with him. You will be left alone because in the end, these types of people, and anyone in general, will not believe it. You don't have to go with the threat games if you suggest something. You have to be willing until you reach the end now and realize one thing: these types of people are never going to change. They are always going to be in this check, in this constant check. If you want your life to be a constant check, a constant struggle, a constant tug of war, and never be calm, live in peace, then continue with this type of person. And here it is true. Many times you tell me, you call me Gem. What do? Do I have this problem at home or this problem in the family? Hey, I'm no one to tell you do this, but it is true that you yourself, with all your responsibility, with all your wisdom of situations and your context, you have to weigh what is best for you, especially when there are children, okay? I understand the fear of retaliation for the kids. And yet, a life like this with the children present is also very hard. In addition to collateral damage in the education they may receive, it's true that they may be set, an example model. Everything would have to be shuffled. We only have one life and we have to take advantage of it. Consider everything and act accordingly. It is not necessary to act abruptly, drastically. If it cannot be done little by little, and it can be done. Look for help professionals, support in your country, where you are family, people who support you, with whom you can support, defend, protect institutions, whatever, but don't stand still. Stop. Detained, letting life pass. No, every day that passes, it doesn't come back, and then we mourn each other well. As a final personal conclusion, these types of people, with them, are not worth direct confrontation. They always win. They always have their apostille, their story, their fantasy is gonna grow. They will always disauthorize you, cancel you. You also give me many comments. I have read about people who have had to deal with narcissistic people and then have ended up speaking badly behind their backs, and well, everyone against them, not turning everyone against them. So in the end, direct confrontation is not worth it, because you are going to find yourself a problem. They don't forgive, they don't forget, and they do seek revenge because it's their way of being. Aren't you really going to face a person here who can sanely consider and study whether he was really wrong, was wrong in that specific case, and is going to apologize to you? No, this doesn't work. Yeah, that's not the case. In the mind of the narcissistic person, it is taken as a personal attack, and there will be revenge. From there is no place for a direct confrontation, in which a direct confrontation is a provocation. Okay, it's a personal attack. Don't go that way, because, well, the consequences that you tell me in the comments pass. What is to be done? Well, you have to isolate them, disauthorize them, annul them, confront them with your well. With their weak points, now that we already know those weak points, when they come looking for us and leave us alone, or with people, what happens is that with people, it is more complicated, and with the type of grandiose narcissists, more complicated because of the issue of aggressiveness. When you see that it is possible, even with a simple one, you mark a limit and put it in its place, or put it in its place and road, and that's it. There's nothing more. You have many resources. Watch the video as many times as you need. I just ask you to be cautious. Patience, little by little, and a lot of brains to know when you can do it and when you can't. In the end, these types of people never change, and it is something that we will always find in society. It is very established in this society. It seems that nowadays this kind of disorder is quite common. I think much more common than what the DSM tells us. We will see the data in the update. I think it is undervalued because it is something that is not usually seen in clinics, because there is no reason for the need for clinics, because they do not see suffering. Okay, it looks a lot less than what might actually exist, I think. And well, that's it for today's video. Please like, subscribe to my channel, leave any comments below, and share this video with your friends. If you enjoyed it, thank you for joining me today. See you soon.